Get him out of this cabin! Now! Caroline's voice sliced through first class as she jabbed her finger toward the quiet man in 1A. A man who hadn't spoken a word, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't done anything except exist in a hoodie she didn't approve of. Passengers stared. Crew members froze. But while Caroline raged, Elias Vance simply watched her, memorizing every insult, every accusation, every threat to have the crew fired. What she didn't know, what made her tirade almost tragic, was that the man she was trying to expel wasn't just allowed in seat 1A. He owned the entire airline. The Apex Ascend's flagship first-class lounge at JFK was designed to be a sanctuary. It was a world of muted carpets, hushed conversations, and the gentle clinking of champagne flutes. The air smelled of expensive leather and roasted coffee beans. It was a bubble, meticulously crafted to insulate its occupants from the democratic chaos of the main terminal. And into this bubble walked Elias Vance. He was by all appearances out of place. He wore a simple charcoal grey hoodie, the kind you buy in a 3-pack. His jeans were faded and his sneakers were comfortable, well-worn running shoes. On his head, a plain black baseball cap was pulled low. He carried a single, unassuming backpack. He bypassed the champagne, headed straight for the water cooler, filled a paper cup, and found a quiet armchair in the corner. He pulled a worn paperback from his bag and settled in invisible, or so he thought. From across the room, Caroline Sterling watched him. Caroline did not just exist in a space. She occupied it, consuming the air and the attention. She was a vision of expensive maintenance, sharp blonde hair, a crisp white linen suit, and a handbag that cost more than a small car. She sat with her husband Marcus, a man who seemed to be a softer, paler echo of her own sharp edges. Absolutely not. Caroline whispered her voice, a low hiss that still managed to cut through the lounge's hush. Marcus, engrossed in his phone, barely looked up. What is it, darling? That she gestured with a sharp, dismissive flick of her chin. Over there. Marcus's eyes followed her gesture and landed on Elias. He frowned, uncomprehending. What? The man in the corner. He can't possibly be a first-class passenger, Marcus. Look at him. He looks like he's about to ask for a handout. This lounge has standards, or at least it used to. Marcus, to his credit, felt a small prickle of discomfort. Caroline, leave it. He's just reading. He's polluting the atmosphere, she insisted. She flagged down a passing lounge attendant, a young woman named Sarah, with a tight smile. Mrs. Sterling, can I get you another mimosa? Caroline gave Sarah a smile that was all teeth. No, thank you, Sarah. But you can tell me why that is being allowed in here. She didn't point. She didn't have to. Her gaze was a laser. Sarah's eyes flickered to Elias and then back. The professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second. All guests in the Apex Lounge are ticketed first-class passengers, ma'am. Are they really? Caroline raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow because he looks like he wandered in from baggage claim. Are you sure he didn't just slip past security? It's a serious concern, you know. Safety, comfort. The implication hung thick and ugly in the air. Safety, comfort. The coded language of prejudice. Elias heard it. He hadn't been paying attention, lost in his book, but the shift in the room's energy was palpable. He didn't look up, but his ears tuned in. He was used to this. He was the founder and CEO of Ascend Air, a 9-figure airline he had built from scratch. He'd started as a baggage handler at LAX, worked his way up to pilot, and then, after seeing the inefficiencies and prejudices of the legacy carriers, he'd secured the venture capital to start his own. He owned the plane. He owned the lounge. He owned the very chair Caroline Sterling was sitting in. But he also knew the value of data. He often flew like this anonymously to see the real, unvarnished customer experience. Today, it seemed he was getting a front-row seat to a different kind of customer experience. Sarah, the attendant, was flustered. I assure you, Mum, our security is very tight. He has a right to be here. A right. Caroline scoffed loud enough for the nearby tables to turn. We pay thousands of dollars for this privilege, for this exclusivity, and it's being eroded by this. She gestured her face a mask of disgust. I am a Platinum Elite member, Sarah. I spend over $100,000 a year with this airline, and I am telling you, I do not feel comfortable. Elias turned a page in his book. He took a sip of his water. This was going to be an interesting flight. I can go and re-verify his ticket, Mrs. Sterling. Sarah offered weakly, desperate to plead her. You do that, Caroline said, sitting back triumphant. Go and verify. We'll wait. Sarah, her face burning, began the humiliating walk of shame across the lounge toward Elias. Elias watched her approach over the top of his book. He saw the apology in her eyes, the sheer terror of confronting one customer to plead another. He preempted her. As she opened her mouth to speak, he smiled gently. It's all right, he said, his voice deep and calm. I'm in 1A. Boarding pass is on my phone. Name's Elias Vance. It's all good. Sarah stopped, relief washing over her. Oh, thank you, sir. I'm so sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me. Elias said, his eyes flicking for a second to Caroline, who was watching them like a hawk. You're just doing your job, and you're doing it well under pressure. He went back to his book. Sarah, emboldened, walked back to Caroline. His ticket is confirmed. Mrs. Sterling. He's in seat 1A. Caroline's face soured. 1A, the best seat on the plane. The flagship suite. Impossible, she muttered. He's probably a diversity hire using a points voucher his company paid for. Disgusting. Marcus finally put his phone down. Darling, please. The flight is boarding soon. Let's just relax. I cannot relax, she snapped. When the standards are crumbling around us. Elias read the same sentence 4 times, his focus broken. He sighed, closed the book, and stood up. He stretched his hoodie, riding up slightly. He decided to get some air, or the airport equivalent, before boarding. He walked out of the lounge, feeling Caroline's eyes burning a hole in his back. This wasn't just an observation trip anymore. This was a test, and he had a feeling Caroline Sterling was about to fail. The atmosphere at Gate 7 was the familiar organized chaos of an international departure. Flight A100 to London. Heathrow was a full flight, a heavy flight in airline parliament, and the gate was packed. Elias stood apart from the crowd, leaning against a pillar, watching the ecosystem he had created. He saw his gate agents, efficient and professional, handling a nervous family. He saw his ground crew, visible through the large windows, expertly maneuvering the catering and baggage. He felt a swell of pride. This was his life's work. Every logo, every uniform, every carefully calibrated process. It was all his. Then he saw her again. Caroline and Marcus Sterling were at the front of the first-class line. Naturally, they were now in full travel mode. Marcus was on his phone again, his voice sharp and full of business jargon. Caroline was rearranging the contents of her carry-on, her expression one of profound impatience, as if the very concept of waiting was a personal insult. We will now begin boarding flight 100 to London, the gate agent announced. We'd like to invite our active duty military and passengers needing special assistance to board at this time. A brief pause, and then we now invite our first-class passengers to board. Caroline was in motion before the class was fully out of the agent's mouth. She pushed her platinum blonde hair back and marched toward the jet bridge, Marcus trailing in her wake. Elias, still in his corner, fell in at the very end of the first-class line. He preferred to board last to be as unobtrusive as possible. He put his book back in his bag and zipped it up. As he stepped into the line, he ended up directly behind Caroline and Marcus. Caroline, sensing someone behind her, turned. Her eyes met his, and for a second, her mask of polite society was gone, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated loathing. It was as if she'd found a cockroach in her cocktail. She turned to Marcus, her voice deliberately loud. I cannot believe this. They're letting everyone in the priority lane now. What is the point of status? He's probably in the wrong line. Elias simply looked ahead. His expression neutral, he handed his phone to the gate agent who scanned it. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Vance, the agent said with a smile. Thank you. I will, Elias replied, his voice warm. Caroline's head snapped around. Vance, the name didn't register. To her, he was just the man in the hoodie. She watched him walk down the jet bridge. "This is an outrage," she hissed to Marcus. "He's in first class with us, darling." Marcus said, his voice weary. "It's an 8-hour flight. Just read a book." "What does it matter?" "It matters," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Because it's wrong." Elias stepped onto the aircraft, a state-of-the-art A350. He was greeted by the flight purser, Amelia. "Welcome aboard, mister." She paused, glancing at her manifest. "Mr. Vance, welcome. You're in Watney to your left. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Just some water." "Thank you, Amelia." "No ice," Elias said, flashing a kind smile. He slid into Juan, the most private suite on the plane, right at the front. He took off his sneakers, slipped his backpack under the ottoman, and began to settle in. He saw Amelia's eyes widen slightly. She was a professional, but she had clearly recognized his name. Elias was not just Mr. Vance to the senior crew. He was the Mr. Vance, the owner. He gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of the head. "Not now. Let's just be a passenger." Amelia, a 20-year veteran, understood immediately. She composed herself. "Of course, sir. Water it is." Moments later, Caroline and Marcus boarded. Amelia greeted them with the same professional smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. You're in 1C and 1D, right across the aisle." Caroline nodded curtly, already scanning the cabin, her eyes adjusting to the dim, mood-lit interior. And then she saw him. Elias sitting in 1A, her preferred seat, the one that was always booked by the time she tried to get it. He was already settled his headphones in, sipping his water. She stopped dead in the aisle, blocking the passengers behind her. "No," she said, her voice sharp. Marcus bumped into her. "Caroline, what is it, move? People are behind us." "He," she said, pointing directly at Elias, "is in the wrong seat." Elias, who had been pretending to listen to music, pulled one earbud out. "Are you speaking to me, Mom?" Caroline marched over to his suite. She was literally standing over him now, radiating fury. "You heard me. That is not your seat. You need to get up now." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Elias said, his voice perfectly even. "My boarding pass says 1A. This is 1A. "Don't lie to me," she snapped. The other first-class passengers were now settling in, and every single one of them was watching this unfold. There is no possible way you are ticketed for that seat. You probably saw it was empty and just took it like you people always do. The words hung in the air. You people. Elias's calm didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "I'm not sure what people you're referring to, Mom, but I can assure you this is my seat. I paid for it just like you." "Paid for it?" Caroline let out a short, barking laugh. "With what, a stolen credit card? I highly doubt it. Now get out before I have you removed." Amelia, the purser, rushed over. "Mrs. Sterling, is there a problem?" "Yes, there is a problem," Caroline shouted, her voice echoing through the silent cabin. "This man is a stowaway. He's in a seat that doesn't belong to him, and he is refusing to move. I demand you call security." The first-class cabin of Flight 100 had gone from a hushed sanctuary to a courtroom. Every eye was on the confrontation. The air moments ago, filled with the scent of warm nuts and pre-departure champagne, was now thick with tension. Amelia the purser stepped between Caroline and Elias's suite. She was the very image of professionalism, but her smile was strained. "Mrs. Sterling, I can assure you, I checked Mr. Vance's boarding pass myself. He is assigned to seat 1A. "Then your system is broken," Caroline retorted. She was unhinged now, her voice rising in pitch. Her carefully constructed facade of upper-ass elegance was cracking, revealing something ugly underneath. "It's obvious he doesn't belong here. Just look at him. He's probably, smuggling something in that dirty backpack." This was the line. The accusation was so vile, so explicitly racist, that a passenger in 2B gasped. Marcus, his face ashen, grabbed his wife's arm. "Caroline, my God, stop it. You're making a scene." "I'm not making a scene," she shrieked, ripping her arm away from him. I am ensuring the safety of this flight. This man is a threat. He's aggressive. Elias, who hadn't moved a muscle, slowly raised an eyebrow. Aggressive, Mom. I haven't even raised my voice. You're the one standing over me shouting and making baseless, slanderous accusations. He said the word slanderous with a quiet, deliberate precision that made Marcus flinch. Don't you talk back to me? Caroline snapped. Amelia, I am a platinum elite million miler. My husband's company Sterling and Sterling has its corporate account with this airline. We spend millions a year. Now I am ordering you to remove this man or I will have your job. This was the nuclear option, the card that people like Caroline Sterling always believed they held the threat to a person's livelihood. Amelia's face went white, but her spine stiffened. She had recognized Elias. She knew exactly who he was. This wasn't just a passenger. This was the man who had personally given her a 15-year service pin at the last company gala. This was the man who had started the employee emergency fund that had paid for her sister's surgery. Her fear vanished, replaced by a cold protective fury. Mrs. Sterling Amelia said, her voice now devoid of its customer service warmth. You are causing a major disturbance. You have threatened a crew member and verbally assaulted another passenger. If you do not return to your seat immediately, I will be forced to call the captain and have you removed for interfering with a flight crew. Caroline's jaw dropped. She was for the first time speechless. She had been challenged. The script she lived by, where her money and her status bent the world to her will, had just been ripped up and thrown in her face. How dare you? She finally sputtered. Take your seat, Mom, now. Caroline, shaking with rage, looked from Amelia's set, determined face to Elias's calm, watchful one. He was smiling. It wasn't a big smile. It was a tiny, almost sad smile at the corner of his mouth. It was the smile of a man who had seen this all before and was profoundly disappointed, but not surprised. That smile was what broke her. It was the smile of someone who knew he had won. No, she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. I'm not going anywhere. This flight is not taking off with him on it. Either he goes or I go. And believe me, this airline will not want me to go. Marcus, call our lawyer. Call Alan. Tell him Ascend Air is about to have a discrimination lawsuit on its hands. It was a brilliant, perverse twist. She was claiming she was the victim. Marcus, his hands trembling, fumbled for his phone. Caroline, think about this. Do it, Marcus. Elias finally unbuckled his seatbelt. The small click echoed in the cabin. He stood up. He wasn't a physically imposing man, but he had an aura of undeniable authority. The cheap hoodie and faded jeans seemed to melt away, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated power of his presence. He wasn't just a man in a seat. He was the man who commanded the room. That won't be necessary, Elias said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of a final judgment. He looked past Caroline, past Amelia, and made eye contact with the junior flight attendant at the galley bulkhead. Tina, he said, reading her name tag. Would you please do me a favor and ask Captain Miller to step out of the cockpit? Tell him. Tell him Elias has a passenger situation. Tina, who didn't know who he was, just saw a passenger ordering her around. Sir, I can't just Amelia cut her off. Tina, do it now. Tell Captain Miller those exact words. Elias has a situation. Tina, recognizing the authority in Amelia's voice, nodded and disappeared into the cockpit. Caroline let out a sound of triumphant contempt. Oh, look at that. He thinks he can call the captain. He thinks he's important. You're just a passenger. You thug. You're nobody, Mom, Elias said, turning his full attention to her. The smile was gone. You've said a lot of things tonight. You've called me a liar, a thief, a smuggler, and a thug. You've threatened a crew member's job, and you've delayed an international flight. All because you couldn't imagine a world where I might be sitting in seat 1A. I am right, she insisted, though a flicker of doubt had finally entered her eyes. The way he spoke, the way Amelia had deferred to him. Something was wrong. We'll see, Elias said. The cockpit door opened. Captain David Miller, a tall man with silver hair and a chest full of medals, stepped out. He looked annoyed. "What is the problem? We are 10 minutes past our pushback time." Amelia. Watts' his eyes scanned the cabin and landed on Elias. The annoyance evaporated. His back straightened. His face registered first confusion, then shock, and finally dawning recognition. "Mr. Vance," the captain said, his voice a disbelieving whisper. "Sir, what are you doing here?" The silence in the first-ass cabin was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the auxiliary power unit. Caroline Sterling's face, which had been a mask of furious red, slowly drained of all colour. She looked from the captain's stunned face to Elias's calm one. The equation didn't compute. "Mr. Vance?" "Sir, Mr. Advance." She repeated, her voice a small, confused squeak. Captain Miller, ignoring her, completely stepped forward and extended his hand. "Sir, I am so sorry. I had no idea you were on the manifest. I would have come to greet you." Elias shook his hand, a flicker of a smile returning. "Hello, David. No need to apologize. I was flying incognito." He gets transferred to his hoodie, just doing a little quality control. So Caroline tried again, her voice trembling. "What is going on, Captain?" This man was Captain Miller, finally turned his steely gaze on her. "This man," he said, his voice cold, "is Elias Vance. He is the founder-chairman and CEO of Ascend Air. He is, in short, my boss. And yours, Mrs. Sterling, in the sense that he owns the very air you are breathing right now." The reveal landed like a physical blow. Caroline staggered back a step, as if she'd been slapped. She grabbed the bulkhead for support. Marcus's phone clattered from his limp hand onto the carpeted floor. CEO Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with horror. "Elias Vance." Elias confirmed, his voice mild. He reached into his backpack, the one Caroline had called dirty. He pulled out a sleek black leather wallet. He didn't have to fumble for an ID. He simply opened it and displayed the simple, elegant black corporate card. "Elias Vance, founder and CEO, Ascend Air Group." "I'm afraid," Elias said, snapping the wallet shut, "that you were right about one thing, Mom." Caroline, mute, just stared at him. "This is my seat," Elias continued, "but I didn't pay for it. I don't have to. I own the plane along with the other 349 planes in our fleet." A low moan escaped Marcus's lips. He was frantically trying to do the math. Sterling and Sterling corporate account Ascend CEO. The pieces were connecting in his brain, forming a terrifying career-ending puzzle. Now Elias said, his tone shifting from mild to all business. He was no longer a passenger. He was the CEO addressing a critical incident. "Captain Miller, we have a problem. This passenger," he said the word with contempt, "and her husband, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, have delayed this flight. Mrs. Sterling has verbally assaulted a crew member and made repeated racist accusations against another passenger. She accused me of smuggling. She created a security risk and refused a crew member's direct order to take her seat. It was a misunderstanding." Caroline finally found her voice. It was a desperate, pleading wail. I didn't know. I didn't. I just thought." "You thought," Elias cut her off, his voice like ice. "What exactly did you think, Mrs. Sterling? That my hoodie meant I was a criminal? That the color of my skin meant I couldn't possibly belong here? Let's be very clear about what happened. You didn't make a mistake. You acted on a deep-seated, ugly prejudice. You didn't misunderstand. You judged." He turned to Amelia. "Amelia, you handled that with extraordinary professionalism." "Thank you." Amelia, her composure finally breaking, simply nodded, her eyes shining with tears of relief and vindication. "Mr. Vance, please." Caroline began stepping toward him, her hands clasped. "I am so sorry. It was the stress of travel. I wasn't thinking. Please, we can just forget this happened, right? Let us take our seats. We won't say another word. I promise." Elias looked at her for a long, cold moment. He saw the desperation in her eyes. But it wasn't the desperation of remorse. It was the desperation of someone who had just been caught. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she had done it to him. "Forget this happened," Elias said. No, Mrs. Sterling. I don't think we will. You see, the problem is, I'm not the only Elias Vance you've done this to. I'm just the only one who happened to own the airline. How many other people have you treated like this? How many other attendants have you threatened? How many other passengers have you tried to humiliate? He shook his head, a look of profound weariness on his face. This isn't just about stress. This is about who you are. He turned to his left and right, addressing the other passengers who were all sitting in rapt, stunned silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Elias Vance, the CEO of this airline. I apologize sincerely for this delay. It appears we have a security situation that needs to be resolved. He turned back to the captain. Captain Miller, this passenger and her husband are a clear and present threat to the civility and safety of this flight. They are to be removed immediately. The words "removed immediately" hung in the air heavier and more final than a prison sentence. Caroline Sterling's world, which for her entire life had been a fortress of privilege, crumbled in that instant. Removed, she gasped. You can't do that. We have a meeting in London. A function, Marcus. Tell him. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. He was a man watching his life pass before his eyes, and it was not a pleasant sight. Mr. Vance, sir, please. My wife, she's not herself. It was a terrible, terrible mistake. A joke in poor taste. We'll pay. We'll pay for the delay. We'll donate to a charity, your favorite charity. It was astonishingly the worst possible thing he could have said. Elias, who had been on the verge of turning away, turned back. His eyes, which had been cold now, had a fire in them. A charity, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. You think you can buy your way out of this? You think this is about money? You and Elias thought. Would they learn? It was always about money. They thought it could buy them a better seat, buy them better treatment, and buy them an apology when they were caught being human garbage. This is not a negotiation, Mr. Sterling, Elias said. This is a consequence. He nodded to Captain Miller. The captain was already on his radio, his voice low and firm. Gate, this is Captain Miller for Flight 100. We need security at the jet bridge. We are deplaning 2 passengers. Yes, unruly. That's correct. No. Caroline shrieked. This was it. The public humiliation. The walk of shame. No, you can't. I am a platinum member. I have rights. You did have rights, Mrs. Sterling. Elias corrected her. You had the right to a safe and comfortable flight, just like everyone else. And you chose to violate that right for another passenger. My airline, my crew, my passengers. We have a zero-tolerance policy for racism, for abuse, and for harassment. Your mom just hit the trifecta. The first-ass cabin, which had been silent, suddenly erupted. Get her off, shouted the man in 2B. She's a disgrace. Well done, Captain, called another passenger. The cabin filled with a low, supportive rumble. The very people Caroline had been trying to impress her peers had turned on her in an instant. She had broken the social contract, and her humiliation was now their entertainment. 2 uniformed Port Authority police officers appeared at the aircraft door. They were large, no-nonsense men, their expressions bored. They had seen this all before. Captain, one of them asked. Captain Miller pointed. These 2, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, they'll be coming with you. Caroline looked at the officers, at the stern faces of the crew, at the contemptuous faces of her fellow passengers, and finally at the cold, implacable face of Elias Vance. She did the only thing she had left to do. She burst into tears. Please, she sobbed a new tactic. Please don't do this. This will ruin us. You don't understand. Please. Elias felt nothing. No, that was a lie. He felt a profound, heavy sadness. He had seen this play out 100 times in his life in 100 different ways. The outburst, the overreach of privilege, and then, when confronted, the crocodile tears. Mom, the officer said, stepping forward, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Marcus, finally snapping into action, grabbed their carry-ons. He was white-faced and trembling, but he knew the game was over. Caroline, we're going now. He pulled at her arm with a final broken sob. Caroline grabbed her purse. As she was escorted into the aisle, she had to shuffle past Elias's suite. She stopped for one last desperate moment. She looked him in the eye. You will regret this," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss, the tears forgotten. "You don't know who my husband is. You don't know who we are." Elias almost laughed. It was so pathetic, so predictable. The last gasp of a dying monarchy. "No, Mrs. Sterling," he said, and his voice was so quiet only she and Marcus could hear it. "You are the one who has no idea. You have no idea who I am, and you have no idea what you've just done." Marcus's head snapped up. He had heard something in Elias's voice, a new, terrifying layer of meaning. What do you mean?" Elias just looked at him. He didn't say a word. He just held Marcus's gaze. And in that second, Marcus Sterling finally made the connection. Vance. Elias. Vance, CEO of Ascend Air. He thought about his firm, Sterling and Sterling. He thought about their client list. He thought about their biggest, most important pension fund, the Ascend Air Pilots Union, a $400 million account, an account whose 10-year contract was as of that very week up for its final renewal. A renewal that was sitting on the desk of the CEO. Marcus's knees literally buckled. He would have fallen if the officer hadn't been holding his arm. "Oh my God." Marcus breathed, his hand going to his chest. "Oh my God, no." Elias just nodded once. "Yes." "Get them off my plane," he said, turning away. As Caroline and Marcus Sterling were marched down the aisle past the staring, judging eyes of the entire first-class cabin, a new sound began. It started as a few tentative claps and then grew. The entire cabin began to applaud. It was a roaring, cathartic ovation. Elias Vance sat down in seat 1A. He buckled his seatbelt, put in his earbuds, and picked up his book. He had a flight to London. He had a company to run. And he had a very, very important contract to review. The plane, now free of its toxic element, was buttoned up quickly. The door closed, the safety video played, and the A350 pushed back from the gate, only 45 minutes behind schedule. Amelia and the crew, energized and vindicated, provided the most stellar service of their lives. Elias, however, was no longer in passenger mode. His book lay unopened. His laptop was out. The cabin's Wi-Fi connected. He was working. He had sent a single simple email to his chief of staff. Subject: Urgent Sterling and Sterling Body. Pull the file on the S&S contract renewal for the pilots union. I want to see it as soon as I land. Also, get me a full background check on a Caroline Sterling married to a Marcus Sterling at the firm. I want to know everything. EV, the real-life part of the story, Elias knew, wasn't the dramatic confrontation. It wasn't the applause. It was the quiet, systemic, and devastating consequences that unfolded in the days after the incident. Karma wasn't just a moment. It was a process. And he had just started the engine. Halfway over the Atlantic, Amelia came by. "Mr. Vance, can I get you anything?" "Coffee, a meal?" "I'm fine, Amelia, thank you," he said, closing his laptop. "But I did want to thank you. You were put in an impossible position. You upheld the values of this company, and you did it with grace and steel. I won't forget it." Amelia blushed. "Sir, it was my honor to be honest. We, the crew, we've all had a Mrs. Sterling before. We never get to see it end like that." "Well," Elias said, a grim set to his jaw, "part of my job is to make sure it always ends like that. That kind of behavior can't have a place here. Not for our passengers, and damn sure not for our crew." He paused. "Send me the name of that other attendant, Tina. The one I sent to the cockpit." She showed a little hesitation. Amelia's face fell. "Oh, sir, she's new. She didn't know." "I know," Elias said, cutting her off gently. "I'm not going to fire her. I'm going to promote her." She hesitated, but she obeyed her senior. She followed the chain of command, even when she thought it was a crazy passenger asking. "She's got good instincts. We'll put her in the purser advancement program." This, Amelia thought, was why they would follow him into a fire. He didn't just see the problem. He saw the people. "Thank you, sir," she said. Now Elias said, "I have one more favor. I want to know about that corporate account Sterling and Sterling. How much do they really spend? Amelia's expression turned professional. I can pull the numbers, sir. Off the top of my head, they're big but difficult. We've had more formal complaints about the Sterling party from Cruz than any other corporate account. They're demanding, they're rude, and they treat us like servants. That, Elias said, is all I need to know. The flight landed at Heathrow. As Elias was deplaning, he was the last one off. He paused at the cockpit. David, he said to the captain, great you made up good time. Thank you, sir. And well, thank you for what you did. The pilots' union. They're not going to like what they hear. Oh, Elias said, a cold smile playing on his lips. I'm counting on it. When he arrived at his hotel, the email from his chief of staff was waiting. It was a complete dossier, and it was so much worse than he thought. Marcus Sterling wasn't just an employee at Sterling and Sterling. He was the son of the founder, Arthur Sterling. The Marcus in the company name was his grandfather. He was finance royalty. And Caroline, she was social royalty. Her entire life was a series of high-profile charity balls, galas, and functions. Her entire identity was built on her name, her husband's name, and the perception of their power. But the most damning file was the contract. Sterling and Sterling had managed the Ascend Air Pilots Union Pension Fund for 20 years, and for 20 years they had been mediocre. Their returns were average, but their fees were astronomical. They were charging the pilots a fortune for management that was barely keeping pace with a standard S&P or FV Honza index fund. They weren't just managers, they were leeches. Elias had been on the fence about the renewal. His new CFO had flagged it. We can do better. His CFO had written their legacy. They're lazy. They're coasting on their father's reputation. Elias looked at the file. He looked at Caroline's social media, a private account his team had easily accessed. It was a cesspool of thinly veiled snobbery pictures from their Hamptons estate and complaints about service everywhere they went. He picked up the phone. It was 3:00 a.m. in New York, but he knew his CFO was a night owl. John, it's Elias. Yes, London is good. Listen about that Sterling and Sterling contract. The pilot's pension. It's not just a no, it's a hell no. And I want you to call an emergency audit of their last 5 years of management. I want to know where every single penny in fees went. Yes, every single penny. He hung up. The twist wasn't just that Marcus was losing a client. The twist was that he might be losing everything. His wife's behavior hadn't just lost them a contract. It had invited the auditors in. And lazy, entitled men always left a paper trail. The fallout was not immediate. In the real world, karma isn't a lightning bolt. It's an avalanche. It starts with a small crack, a tremor, and then the entire mountain comes down. The first tremor was the video. A passenger in 1F, a tech blogger, had filmed the entire confrontation. Not the end part with the ID reveal, but the ugly racist beginning. He had filmed Caroline jabbing her finger, calling Elias a thug, accusing him of smuggling, and demanding he be removed. He'd posted it with the caption, "My flight to London Hassender, you have a huge problem. This Platinum Elite passenger went on a racist tirade against a man in a hoodie. He was just reading a book. Utterly disgusting." The video went viral before Flight 100 even landed. By the time Elias was in his hotel room, Ascend Air and Dassault Jeff Caroline were trending. The initial backlash was against the airline. Why did you let this happen? Why was this man, Elias, not protected? Elias, seeing an opportunity, made a choice. He didn't release a statement. He showed up. He called the blogger, thanked him for the video, and asked for the full unedited clip. Then he had his PR team post the full story, including the clip of the captain identifying him, and the clip of Caroline and Marcus being escorted off the plane by the Port Authority. The statement was simple. This is Elias Vance, CEO of Ascend Air. I was the passenger in 1A. I want to be clear, my crew led by Purser Amelia handled this situation perfectly. But what you see here is a disease. At Ascend, we have zero tolerance for it. The passengers in question, Caroline and Marcus Sterling, have been permanently banned from all Ascend Air flights. We fly together, or we don't fly at all. The narrative flipped instantly. Elias was a hero. Ascend Air was the gold standard, and the full, unfiltered, high-definition rage of the internet turned as one to Caroline and Marcus Sterling. The second tremor, the job Arthur Sterling, Marcus's father, woke up to his phone ringing. It was the head of the Ascend Air Pilots Union. The call was not pleasant. I saw the video. The union boss growled. Your daughter-in-law harassing the CEO and the things she said. It's a misunderstanding, Arthur stammered. Save it. We're out. We're pulling the pension fund, and you're lucky we don't sue you for mismanagement. Mismanagement. Arthur's blood ran cold. Oh yeah. The union boss said, Mr. Vance's office just sent us the results of an audit. You've been skinning us on fees for a decade. We're taking this to the SEC. You're finished. The call ended. Arthur's $400 million client was gone, and an SEC investigation was coming. He walked out of his office through the marble lobby of Sterling & Sterling and into his son's office. Marcus was at his desk, his head in his hands. Get out, Arthur said, his voice a dead monotone. Father, you're a fool. You married a fool and you've ruined me. You've ruined this family. Get out of my building. You're fired. You're disinherited. I'm done. Marcus, the man who had never worked a real day in his life, was unemployed. The third tremor, the social life. Caroline was in a full-blown panic. She had been doxxed. Her phone was a constant stream of hateful messages, but she figured she could ride it out. She just had to get to the Hamptons. She'd lay low at the country club. Her real friends would understand. She and Marcus, in a stony, terrifying silence, drove to the club. They pulled up in their Bentley. As they walked in, the music in the dining room seemed to stop. The clinking of silverware stopped. Everyone was staring. The club manager, Mr. Henderson, a man who had scraped and bowed to her for years, walked over. His face was grim. Mrs. Sterling, he said, not unkindly. I'm afraid I have to ask you to leave. What, Henderson, don't be ridiculous. I have a 12:30 lunch reservation. No, ma'am, you don't. The board held an emergency vote this morning. Your incident, it violates the club's code of conduct. Your membership has been revoked. Revoked you. You can't. My family built this wing. I'm sorry, Caroline. It's done. A woman at a nearby table, one of Caroline's best friends, stood up. You're a racist, Caroline. What you did, it was disgusting. We don't want you here. We don't want your kind here. Caroline looked around at the faces of the people she had gossiped with, drank with, planned parties with. They were all looking at her with the same cold reptilian judgment she had just 24 hours earlier turned on Elias Vance. She had become, in a word, toxic. She and Marcus were forced to do the walk of shame again. They got in their Bentley and drove away, the stares of the entire club following them. The avalanche. The SEC investigation turned up exactly what Elias's CFO had suspected. For years, Sterling & Sterling had been churning the pilots' accounts, unnecessary buying and selling, to generate massive commission fees. It was lazy, it was greedy, and it was highly illegal. Arthur Sterling, to save himself, gave his own son up. Marcus was indicted. To pay for his legal defense, they had to sell everything. The Bentley, the house in the Hamptons, the penthouse in the city, Caroline's jewelry. Caroline was forced to get a job. She, a woman who had never worked a day in her life, was now a hostess at a mid-level restaurant in a suburb she'd never heard of. Her sharp features were now drawn and tired. Her manicured nails gone. Her blonde hair, her natural mousy brown. The karma wasn't just losing her seat. It was losing the privilege that made her believe she was entitled to that seat in the first place. 1 year later, Elias Vance was in the Apex Lounge at JFK. He was on his way to London again. He was still wearing a hoodie. He was still drinking water. Amelia, the former purser, walked over. She was no longer in a flight attendant's uniform. She wore a sharp-tailored business suit. "Mr. Vance," she said, a warm smile on her face. "Your plane is ready when you are." "Thank you, Amelia," Elias said, smiling back. How's the new job? Incredible, sir. Amelia now, the new Director of In-Flight Customer Experience. A position Elias had created for her beamed, we fully implemented the Fly with Respect training program you designed, and complaints against crew are down 80%. That's not you, Amelia, that's the crew. You just gave them a voice, Elias said. You and Tina. Tina, the attendant he'd promoted, was now Amelia's top deputy. Well, Amelia said, it's amazing what happens when people feel like their boss has their back. Elias nodded. He picked up his bag and headed to the gate. As he walked, a different scene played out. 50 mi away, a bus pulled up to a curb in a light drizzle. Caroline Sterling, her shift over, got on. She looked tired. She wore a thin coat, and her face was etched with a permanent weary frown. She sat down and looked out the window. She was no longer JFK Caroline. She was just Caroline, a person on a bus. She watched a plane, an Ascendair A350, take off in the distance, climbing, until it was just a silver speck against the clouds. Her husband, Marcus, had taken a plea deal. He was serving 18 months in a minimum security prison for fraud. Her father-in-law had lost his firm and his reputation bankrupted by the lawsuits and the SEC fines. Caroline was alone. She had sold her last piece of jewelry to pay the rent on her tiny one-bedroom apartment. This was the hard karma. It wasn't a single fiery moment of retribution. It was a long, cold, and quiet life, stripped of all the artifice and privilege she had used as a weapon. It was the daily grinding realization that the world did not in fact revolve around her. It was the understanding that her actions had consequences real, permanent, and devastating. She had mocked a man because he didn't look the part. Now she was the one who was invisible. Aboard Flight 100, Elias Vance settled into seat 1A. He looked out his window at the same clouds Carolyn was looking up at. He took no pleasure in her downfall. He had not set out to ruin her. She had simply stepped in front of an engine of her own making. His company was stronger. His crew was happier, and the pension fund for his pilots was now with a firm that was giving them double the returns at 1/10 of the cost. He had fixed the problem. He picked up his book, put in his earbuds, and took a sip of his water. The plane leveled off, hurtling through the night toward the future. He was building a future where everyone from the person in 38E to the person in 1A was treated with dignity. And as he flew on, he smiled. It was a real smile this time, a smile of peace. In the end, Caroline Sterling learned that the price of prejudice is far higher than any first-class ticket. She didn't just lose her seat. She lost her standing, her wealth, and the comfortable life built on judging others. Elias Vance continued to fly, not just as a CEO, but as a testament to the fact that worth isn't measured by the brand you wear, but by the character you show. A real-life story of karma in the clouds. What did you think of Caroline's downfall? Was the karma too harsh, or exactly what she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories where arrogance meets its match, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories of brutal, satisfying karma. We'll see you on the next